Mary Jane? Since Keith is not here. Okay.
Going live.
Now remember that means you know how. Oh, I thought. You know what they say about hot mics. I thought I'd turned it off, but I wasn't real successful. Okay, I'd like to call the Fiscal Committee meeting to order. And the first order of business is acceptance of the meeting of June 17th, 2022. Do I have a motion?
The minutes. Move the minutes.
Thank you, Senator D'Alessandro. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Senator. Yeah. I'm okay. Daniels, thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, that's done. Okay, the following items are going to come off the consent calendar.
Do you want to mention the old business that we're not taking them off?
It's fine. It's just staying there. FIS 22-244, FIS 22-255, FIS 22-256, FS 22-247, FIS 22-250, FIS 22-263, and FIS 264. Are there any other items to come off the consent calendar? Seeing none, could I have a motion to accept the other items on the consent calendar?
Move the consent calendar.
Representative Petrie and Senator D'Alessandro.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll call the roll.
Oh, yes, you may call the roll.
Okay. This is on the consent calendar. Representative Enrique, yes. Representative Leishman. Yes. Representative Petrie.
Yes.
Representative Wallner. Yes. Senator Daniels.
Yes.
Senator Morse. Yes. Senator Gray.
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald.
Yes.
Senator D'Alessandro.
Yes.
Representative Umberger.
Yes,
Madam Chair, the vote is 10-0.
thank you. Vote is 10-0. Items are approved. Turn now to FIS 244, Department of Health and Human Services. You don't all have to leave, you know. This is probably one of the most exciting things you could do on a Friday morning. I know. A, I took a shower, and B, I brushed my teeth. You know?
Good morning, Nathan White, DHHS CFO.
Good morning, Trish Tilley, Director of Public Health.
Good morning. I'm glad you didn't leave, so thank you. Okay, Senator Daniels, I believe you have some questions to start with.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Noticed in the explanation, it talked about that that some money you didn't get some money that you thought you were going to get or something. And can you explain a little bit about that and the process on how we ended up where we are?
Sure. So during the Senate phase of the budget, the department had requested to remove $1.6 million in federal funds from each year. At the time, there were a number of unknowns relative to the federal funds. We didn't know whether the federal dollars would be going directly to some of the family planning centers. And at that point in time, Director Tilley can speak better to this, but at that point in time, there were also challenges relative to the Title X rules, whereas many of the family planning contractors, they were not willing to take those funds at that time. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that.
Yes, so thank you very much for that. So again, early in that Senate phase, there was some conversation about whether we were going to both be able to expend those funds or if those funds were going to go directly to the vendors. One of the miscommunications that happened that time was around this notion of funds going directly from the federal government directly to a vendor. That is the case for one agency, but the rest of the agencies that we contract with get our funds, the department really put them out into contracts. So we knew that when this happened, that we would likely need to have to come back to fiscal to remedy this. We knew we would also be getting a new award. So that's part of the confusion that happened back in the budgeting process. This item here today simply allows us to accept new funding that's been made available to us so that we can disperse it into the community.
Okay, and this new funding is on top of the funding that you had through the budget?
I'll let you answer that part of that, and then I'll fill it.
Yes, we're asking to add this federal grant award to the budget. Again, an error was made during the Senate phase where we requested that the 1.6 million be taken out. Historically, those funds have always been budgeted through the budget process. In recent memory, I can't recall, nor was I able to identify any time at which those funds had been taken out. So this is really to add the carry forward grant funds, allow us to spend those funds, and the new grant award. In a normal year, this would have just been included in HB1 and it already would have been budgeted. But again, because an error was made at that time during the Senate phase, given the many unknowns, we had requests that it be taken out.
And the only thing I'll add on that from a programmatic side was, again, we're in a new award period with our federal funder. So we had federal funds in the beginning for state fiscal year 22. Those funds have now all been either expended or returned to the federal government. We have a new award that was awarded to us in April 2022. And so that's what we're accepting here is that new award that was awarded to us for a new 5-year cooperative period.
Okay, so how did we make it through without these funds in the last round?
Sure, thank you. So part of the within our appropriation in the past fiscal year, even early back in the fiscal year, some of our agencies were not expending or didn't want to accept federal funds. We added some federal funds, I believe in December at Executive Council. So some of those federal funds were put into contract. We knew that we would need to amend those contracts this spring when we got a new award. So we just simply didn't spend down all of those federal dollars. We anticipate spending down this new award in full.
Okay, and with Title X, did the change of the administration in Washington, did that affect any way New Hampshire's laws?
I'll answer that this way. So yes, there was a change in the federal administration. Under the previous administration, there were some rules attached to the Title X funds that made some of our historical partners in the community either ineligible, and then other entities did not choose to participate in Title X because of some of the rules that were a part of the Title X program back under the previous administration. In the fall of last year, November, those rules changed, and our partners in the community are willing to participate in the Title X program now.
Okay, how many agencies or organizations would be getting this money?
That's a great question. I can tell you that we currently have 4 community health centers, so places like Amoskeag Health in Manchester, Coas Family Health up in Berlin, the Belknap Merrimack CAP in the Laconia area, and Lamprey, I believe. Yep, Lamprey down in the Nashua area. Those are our current grantees. To Governor and Council to add additional funds because that's in procurement. I can't tell you who's in that bucket. So when those go to Executive Council, we will be adding funds to agencies that have responded to an RFP that was back in the fall.
Okay, and one final question. Under Class 102, it indicates that the funds will be used to contract with vendors to provide services required by Title X program, but we don't have any kind of a list as to what those things are, other than some ambiguous terms that could pick up many different things.
Sure. I can tell you what isn't funded, and then I can tell you what is funded. So abortion services are not funded through Title X services. No state nor general funds are allowed to be used for abortion-related services. So I'll put that over to the side. What is funded is access to comprehensive reproductive health care, and that includes access to contraception. It includes cancer screenings, cervical cancer screenings, and other screenings. It includes screening for sexually transmitted infections and treatment for those sexually transmitted infections. It includes other sort of education for even things like abstinence, safer sex. Those are the pieces that are included within Title X.
Good, thank you.
Are there any further questions? No? Okay. Could I have a motion?
I would move the item.
Thank you,
Second.
Senator D'Alessandro, seconded by Representative Leishman. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Okay. Mic on. This is for 244. Representative Emmerich votes yes. Representative Leishman.
Yes.
Representative Petrie.
Yes.
Representative Wallner. Senator Daniels.
No.
Senator Morse.
Yes.
Senator Gray.
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald.
Yes.
Senator D'Alessandro.
Yes.
Representative Umberger.
Yes,
Madam Chair, the vote is 9-1.
thank you. The vote being 9-1, FIS 22-244 passes. We now turn to FIS 22-255, Department of Military Affairs and Veterans Services.
Good morning, ma'am, committee members. For the record, Major General David Michaelitis, the Adjutant General, New Hampshire National Guard. And with me to here today is Colonel Rich Olbermann, the Director of our Wellness Program.
And the uniform of the day is fatigues.
Yes, we call it OCP. Was it Operational Camouflage Pattern?
Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah, those came out after I left the service, so I don't have a pair of those in my closet, but so I'm sorry. Well, welcome. And Senator Daniels, did you have a question on
Yes,
this?
I just had a question. The explanation on this seems like it should be something that fits more in the Department of Education than in Veterans Affairs, you know, when we're talking about increasing the knowledge and the skills of STEM. So I was wondering if you could just help me make that connection with the military.
Yes, sir. So you're referring to what's called Starbase. It's a Department of Defense funded program for youth-based initiatives. And so the funding comes through DoD, Department of Defense. We were the ones who took the initiative to apply, put the application in to compete nationally for this program that increases STEM-based training for fifth grade students in local schools. So once it's established, we'll collaborate with Department of Education to ensure whether the curriculum is Learn Everywhere or part of the education-based system that gets credit for in the school system. But because it's funded by DoD, we are the lead agent.
Okay, and I think I kind of understand all that. I don't see the connection. I mean, you're helping out a fifth grader, but you know, if you were saying, oh, this is going to help us recruit something later. I can't find that connection.
There are certain youth-based programs that the Department of Defense funds. For example, there's something called Youth Challenge. So for underprivileged kids who are struggling to get through a high school degree, certain states run what's called the Youth Challenge program, where it's sort of like a one-year military-type boot camp where the disadvantaged kids who might not get a high school degree come, and it's run like a one-year boot camp to get these kids to get a GED. This is a separate but program developed for youth. So a lot of our technology in the Air Force, the Air National Guard at Pease, and some of our high-tech stuff in the Army Guard here, our HIMARS rocket systems, require like a technical-based competency of which today's youth doesn't have. So when they do their ASVAB test to try to take that initial enlistment test, the scores aren't there. So this is just an initiative to try to promote STEM-based topics in schools. They won't say, but indirectly it exposes the youth to the military. So by us hosting it in Pembroke, it'll allow kids to come in, see military personnel, might put the connection, you know, if we have a helicopter there or something like that, where they see this sort of correlation between getting a STEM type education and how it correlates to a sort of military profession.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Representative Petrie.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for being here. I'm surprised that you don't work more with the Civil Air Patrol, because they do a lot of this training, you know, through their program. And obviously the Civil Air Patrol is Auxiliary Air Force, so if you would.
Sir, we do. So we sort of partner with Civil Air Patrol, Navy Sea Cadets, and it's Boy Scouts BSA to support them. So, for example, Civil Air Patrol and Sea Cadets use our Concord Armory to host their monthly meetings. And so we typically open up our armories for no cost to any youth-based program if they need facilities to be used.
Right. Now, is there more coordination with what they do, you know, as far as the programs?
Yes, to the extent that we will typically meet with their leadership on an annual basis to see what synergy can be provided. So they will use our facilities for their, like, lack of a better term, summer camp. So they will go up to Stratford, New Hampshire, where our training facility is, and stay overnight or for the weekend and use some of our training facilities there.
Very good. Thank you.
Are there any, Senator D'Alessandro?
Thank you, Madam Chair. General, great to see you. Thanks for coming. I'd like to know how you identify students that are at risk. How do you correlate this with the education department? Because some of these kids may fall into the category that needs special education and things of that nature. But if you're going to improve skills for students at risk in the 5th grade, that's a fairly significant task, and this isn't enough money, in my opinion, to do that. So how is it done?
So, sir, what we did was we reached out to the Department of Education, and after that, we went to the Manchester and Londonderry school districts and talked to their superintendents. And we described the program to them. They were all in. Unfortunately, both districts, their superintendents have moved on, so we got to start anew from those 2 schools. But they identified the lack of that STEM-based, and what typically happens, and it varies slightly from state to state, is, for example, a 5th grade student would get on his school bus, come to Pembroke, and for 1 day, for 5 weeks, so 1 day a week for 5 weeks, show up to a sort of a STEM computer digital classroom that this will fund both the classroom material and the teachers to then just teach these kids almost sort of like an extracurricular activity to try to enlighten them and say, hey, look, this is what you can do in that type of environment.
One further question. So you have to reach out to the school district. You create some kind of a rapprochement with the school district. The school district identifies students, places them in this program. Who does the follow-up?
It will be the contracted educators through this initiative that will then have to measure the metrics to prove that, like, it's improving their scores.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, General. Nice to see you here. A Manchester Memorial High School graduate, West Point graduate, distinguished Greek American. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
So I would like this program in Conway.
I think it sounds like a great program, but I think that the focus on getting to a school district and
Yeah.
doing some kind of an arrangement with them, that's going to be interesting how that happens. But,
Right. Okay, are there any further questions?
I would move the item.
Thank you very much. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Senator Daniels. Will the clerk please call the roll?
This is on 255. Emmerich votes yes. Representative Leishman.
Yes.
Representative Petrie.
Yes.
Representative Wallner. Senator Daniels.
Yes.
Senator Morse. Senator Gray.
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald.
Yes.
Senator D'Alessandro.
Yes.
Representative Umberger.
Yes,
Madam Chair, the vote is 10-0.
thank you. The vote being 10-0, FIS 22-255 passes. We now turn to FIS 22-256 from the Department of Military Affairs. So no exercise this morning. Okay, did someone have a question? Representative Rosenwald, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have two questions actually, but I don't know if the department might not be better able to assist in the answers.
The Health and Human Services.
Yeah, if they maybe could join Military and Veterans Affairs.
Good morning, Lori Shibonette, Commissioner of Health and Human Services.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I noticed in the narrative that they're not specific performance measures for the effectiveness of this proposed program, but there's a lot of interest in the legislature in making sure that our substance use disorder prevention and treatment programs have quantitative measurable outcomes. And we have another item later from the Department of Safety about the no safe experiences. They have two really, I think, spot on performance measures. One is the reduction in the number of drug overdose deaths in young people. And the second one is the reduction in percentage of youth use of non-prescribed drugs. And so my question is, what kind of performance measures is this program going to have? The narrative points towards it may reduce stressors, which might reduce binge drinking. So we're not going to just look at stress reduction, are we? We're going to actually look at, did the gym memberships and the fitness equipment lead to a reduction in substance use? And can you get that in a year?
So, ma'am, I'm going to try first. I'm going to pass it on to Colonel Oberman, our wellness director. So I'll give you context, first of all. So I sit on the Joint Military Task Force, one of 8 task force for the Government Commission on Alcohol and Other Drugs. And we advocate for service members, families, and the veteran community. Typically, a majority of our advocacy is for veterans because of the size of the population within New Hampshire. However, National Guard Bureau did a study of the health of the force for the Army National Guard for the 54 states and territory. In 2019, we ranked 45th in a bad way for the health of our force. And the biggest discrepancy was alcohol misuse. That apparently affects 7.9% of our force. And then so what we did was this initiative will hopefully get after that. So I think big, broad speaking, the annual performance metric would hopefully be the decline of substance misuse amongst our force. That's the broad. And then do you want to allow?
Thank you, sir. So that's one part of it. The other thing, which is also difficult, is this money is not just for the New Hampshire National Guard. I have to be very clear about that. This money is from the state of New Hampshire for all servicemen and women serving in the state of New Hampshire. Because of that, I don't have access to their metrics. So that's where we're consulting to do questionnaire support from a professional statistician to go ahead and write the proper questions to get after what you're asking for is how are we measuring the decline of substance use? And so that will be contracted out to that specialist, build that, and as part of the reimbursement process, they will have to answer these questions so we can collect the data from all service members and have that piece of it. Internally, what the Adjutant General just stated, we have unit risk inventories that we get on an annual basis that we can show for the New Hampshire Army National Guard, at least, whether this has caused a decrease in their use, and that will be also reported. But because it's for all service members, I don't have a tool that I could get after what you're looking for without doing that questionnaire.
But I think you did answer that you're going to look at the end result, not just did it reduce the stressors.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, ma'am.
And I think that's good. My second question has to do with the funding more. As you I hope know, the Governor's Commission funding is currently entirely directed towards the Medicaid program, not other contracts. Those contracts have been backfilled by a 5-year agreement with the hospitals. That runs out, I think, in another year. What is the plan for future funding? And maybe Commissioner Shibben wants to take this. Is this a one-time expectation, or do you think we're going to look at ongoing funding after that agreement with the hospitals runs out?
I think that, I'll speak directly to the hospital's contribution for the Governor's Commission. I do expect that we will enter into negotiations to continue that contribution moving forward. As for this specific agreement, I'm going to have to let the general speak to that because I wasn't part of those conversations.
Thank you.
So, ma'am, I believe it's a 3-year pilot program. So what we plan on doing is look after the data after 3 years and seeing did it work. And then from that point forward, then decide is that the sort of number one priority for our service members. For example, another issue we have is childcare. So it's another priority for us, but we're trying to get the Department of Defense fund a pilot program for that. So it's almost 3 years from now, we'll sort of review this data, say is it our number one issue for service members to try to reduce substance misuse and retain them in our force.
Well, final question then, if I could. So if you're planning a 3-year program, but we have maybe 1 or maybe 2 years of hospital backfill funding, would you fund the 3rd year or maybe the 2nd and 3rd year from within your department's current budget, or would you end this program?
So if I understand it correctly, ma'am, I think we will utilize this pilot program up to this dollar amount of $500,000. So in the event it's underutilized, we would probably come to you and ask for an extension to just use the funds that have been allocated right now for the length of time of which the use is needed.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there further questions? Yes, Senator Daniels.
Thank you. It's been stated that the purpose of this is to lower substance misuse. We have numerous programs out there through HHS now that deal with that. And to my knowledge, they haven't been overly successful because we continue to pour more and more money into it. Why aren't we just using those programs? I mean, why it seems like we're getting the military, which should be more the defense of the state of the country, involved in these social.
So, sir, I think an ancillary benefit to this program is the fact that it will also work as a retention tool. So I tell people all the time, there's no line at our door. right? This is the worst recruiting year since the end of the volunteer draft in 1973. And so the problem is no one's joining. So how do we retain our soldiers? Well, if they have a substance misuse issue, it's a physical fitness issue. The Army just rolled out a new fitness test called the Army Combat Fitness Test. It's the CrossFit Games, right? There's 6 events, and when 75% of your force is part-time and you only see them 2 days a month, how do you keep them in shape so they can pass that test and retain them in your force? So, I mean, it's primarily to get after the health of the force, but that ancillary benefit is the fact that if they're in our force, we have to figure out how to retain them. And then we only have 2 facilities that have 24/7 gym access. It's Concord and it's our Pease Air National Guard base. So if I'm a part-time soldier in Keene, where does he work out or train or exercise other than those 2 days a month where he doesn't have in his facility? So we replicated this state the state employee sort of Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield sort of concept of trying to get a reduced gym membership and sort of buying physical fitness equipment for their home in order to hopefully drive substance misuse down, fitness up, and retain a quality force that we can help our state and our nation.
So a few years ago, I was in the National Guard.
Yep.
We didn't have any kind of this program. How did we ever make it through? I mean, I think I heard you say that we were in like 45th in health now.
Yes.
Have you got any kind of historical thing to show where we were in the last 10 years?
They published an annual report, so we have 2019 and 2020 with us. I can look back. So in 2019 we were 45th in a bad way, and in 2020 we were 37th.
Okay, I just curious because historically, we didn't have to have this $500,000 program to stay in shape. But then, what has changed? I mean,
for example, today's youth has difficulty handling stress. So whether it's substance misuse, suicides, or any other stressor to today's youth, we have significantly more psychological health directors and staff to ensure the health of our force. The fitness test has changed. It used to be push-ups, sit-ups, 2-mile run. Now it's a deadlift, it's a shuttle run, it's the throwing a ball, and it's like everything is more complex or more demanding. And I would argue that our deployment cycle has increased. So we just got off 2 years of COVID response, but we had over 800 soldiers and airmen activated. We are in the process of deploying another 450 soldiers out the door in the next 12 months. And so the pace of our operational tempo of what we're doing has not subsided. And I think when you look at the lack of the ability of our youth to handle stress, the smaller size of our force, and the operational demands of which we're placing upon them is creating this perfect storm.
okay, one final question. This may be more for the commissioner. If this program is successful, where others in HHS may not be as successful, can we expect that there will be programs that will be dropped within DHHS in favor of this?
Anytime we have duplicate programs that target the same demographic or the same audience, if we find one of those programs is more successful than the other, then obviously we would shift funding towards the program that has shown to be more successful. That is why we measure our success in all of our programs.
Thank you.
Are there further questions? Seeing none, could I have a motion, please?
I move the item.
Thank you, Senator D'Alessandro. Second. Second by Representative Petrie. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Roll call on 256. Emmerich votes yes. Representative Leishman.
Yes.
Representative Petrie.
Yes.
Representative Wallner. Senator Daniels.
Yes.
Senator Morse.
Yes.
Senator Gray.
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald.
Yes.
Senator D'Alessandro.
Yes.
Representative Umberger.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the vote is 10-0.
The vote on FIS 22-256 is 10-0. It passes. Thank you very much. We now turn to FIS 22-247 from the Department of Business and Economic Affairs. That's in tab 5. Oops, you need to push the button.
Sorry. Good morning. My name is Mark Liberty. I am the Broadband Project Manager at the New Hampshire Department of Business and Economic Affairs. Happy to answer any questions or go over this program as you'd like.
Okay, thank you. Representative Leishman, I see that your mic is on, so you must have a question.
I have a few, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, just continue with your questions.
Thanks, Mark, for appearing today. So you responded to a couple of questions we had prior to the meeting, and Mr. Shea was kind enough to get them to us, your answers. And one of the documents you suggested that we look at was the State of New Hampshire Capital Projects Fund Program Plan for Broadband Contracts. So reading quickly through the document, I see there's a requirement for mapping, I think about $800,000 in the request that you have before us today. Has any of that mapping been done to identify those areas of the state that are really suffering? I think it said 30,000 homes or households don't have access to broadband.
That's exactly what we're doing. I think when we started this, it was clear there was no real mechanism to determine what the unserved and underserved are, particularly with the new speed. I know that in question 3, the federal government is going to be requiring either 100/100 speeds, which is upload and download speeds, or 100 upload, 100 download, 20 upload, with scalability to those speeds. There's no mapping out there at the federal or state level that show that. So when we were working on this, we thought it was important to develop mapping and to use some of our administrative funds that we have for that purpose. We felt that was going to be a benefit for this program and moving forward.
Another question, if I could, Madam Chair, thanks. Now, it says here that there's going to be like one contractor selected to service the whole state. Am I reading that correctly? I'm just curious.
For
why-
this part of the entire contract, yes. As this is 40% of the money that we've received from the federal, what we're going to receive from the federal government. We were approved for $122 million. The other approximately $65 to $70 million is going to be in the broadband matching grant initiative that was approved by the legislature last year in SB 85, and we had to get it amended this year in Senate Bill 445. So the majority of the funds that come from this grant will be through that broadband matching grant, which is going to be a municipality-based program. So ISPs and towns will work together to address those, and that will be open to all providers. We wanted to move forward with this other portion of it because as we were starting to go through this process, we were seeing things like inflation go up, gas prices, supply chain, and we felt that as fast as we could move forward as compared to other states, we felt like it would give us a better opportunity to get those supplies and get broadband build out happening before we had all the states working at the same time. Because remember, there's also the infrastructure bill that's going to have at least $100 million, and for other states, much, much more. So they're all going to be working at the same time to be doing build out. So we felt it was important to try to get a jump on that, and we felt that was the best mechanism to do that. So 40% of those funds will be through the RFP process, which is currently out there now, with the remaining majority of the funds in a very targeted one-on-one community, one ISP, or however that works. So that's how we're going to move forward with that.
And just one further, if I could, Madam Chair, thanks. So now, what guarantees are you going to have that these rates, now you got a private company using public funds to develop better infrastructure for broadband. I see there was like a $30 credit per month that would be given out, which doesn't seem significant when most bills are far higher than that for those that can't afford broadband, period. So what guarantees is the state going to do to make sure the prices are reasonable? And I know that $30 is federally set, I understand.
Yeah, that's the federal program. It used to be 50, and then in the revised ARPA bill, they changed the program, made it to 30. However, they also are going to have, some providers are also going to offer lower tiers, low cost tiers that will, some of them will start as low as $30. So theoretically, if you meet certain qualifications, you wouldn't pay anything, but that's a federal program. Those are questions that we're going to be asking to not only to the provider who would get who would be the applicant for this RFP, also for BMGIs. And we're going to ask those questions. Are you participating in this program? Are you going to be participating in the low-cost tier program? We are going to be asking a lot of questions on that, at least in BMGI and not in this program per se. We can't mandate certain prices. That's in the state law. So we can't say, well, you can do a price here, but at this community, you have to have a different price. We can't mandate that, but we can have a conversation, say, what are your pricing? What's your plan? And we can discuss that. And then later on in infrastructure, there's going to be mechanisms for areas that are considered high costs. And we're still trying to work through that. That's down the line in probably 2023. And there may be some mechanisms there to address more of the affordability issues there as well. So there are a lot of areas that we're going to be looking into to make sure that that there's affordability built into all of this.
Thanks. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Are there further questions? I do have one.
Mhm.
Several years ago, there were broadband studies in the North Country in particular.
Mhm.
And the major problem up there was called the last mile.
Mhm.
Is this broadband thing
Yes.
going to go the last mile?
Yes, and that's the preference of the programs we're working with. So every dollar that we're doing, all 122 minus the administrative costs will go towards last mile build out. Correct.
Okay, because that's the real problem.
Yep.
Not, not having 6 ISPs in your town. So, okay, are there any further questions? Pardon?
Move
Oh.
approval.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Senator D'Alessandro. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Roll on 247. Emmerich votes yes. Representative Leishman.
Yes.
Representative Petrie.
Yes.
Representative Wallner. Senator Daniels.
Yes.
Senator Morse. Senator Gray.
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald.
Yes.
Senator D'Alessandro.
Yes.
Representative Umberger.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the vote is 10-0.
Thank you. With the vote of 10-0, FIS 22-247 passes. We now
Thank you.
Thank you. We now turn to FIS 250 from the Department of Environmental Services.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. For the record, I'm Bob Scott, Commissioner for the Department of Environmental Services. I have with me Brandon Kernan, who is the head of our drinking water section, a very busy section of late, to answer any of your questions. So, Madam Chair, I can give a brief explanation if you'd like, or we can just go right to questions. We're here at your disposal.
Okay, let's see what we have in the way of questions. I guess you answered them all.
If I could, I would say we have a lot of great work going on in the department. I'm
Yes,
very
yes.
proud of the group.
And by the way, I appreciate the email I got yesterday explaining how the water mapping, whatever it's called, I know it has a name, for mapping your where your water lines are, and so that was a good thing, and I appreciate it, and I'm sure that hopefully some of the other folks in here got good news from DES. So, Senator Morris. Okay, thank you. Senator Morris moves the item. Do I have a second by Senator Rosenwald? Will the clerk please call the roll?
This is on 250. Emmerich votes yes. Representative Leishman.
Yes.
Representative Petrie.
Yes.
Representative Wallner. Senator Daniels.
Yes.
Senator Morse. Senator Gray.
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald.
Yes.
Senator D'Alessandro.
Yes.
Representative Umberger.
Yes,
Madam Chair, the vote is 10-0.
thank you. The vote being, could you hang on just a second because I forgot to ask a question, but the item passes. Okay, that's not a problem. Um, yeah, we're talking about checking lead pipes. This is just in the main water system, or is it the connection between the public water or the main water system and the house?
So I'll defer to Brandon here, but it does, the federal requirements and therefore what we're trying to help the systems with are including not only the water main, but the connections that go to the house.
Okay.
So is that
Okay.
okay?
All right, that's a good thing. Thank you very much. And we're not doing very well on this one, Representative Emmerich.
Well, my question is a little bit just kind of on this topic, but in general. I'm the chairman of the planning board in our town, and we're confronting right now the groundwater remapping of the town and the aquifer protection zone. Come to find out, the new federal mapping, we have a closed dump that we capped about 10 years ago. It sits right in our aquifer protection zone as newly defined. Should there be, or is there a program to do PFAS testing for these capped dumps?
Representative Emmerich, I'm not sure if it got to Commissioner Scott or not, but I have asked at our September meeting that he come prepared to talk to us about the PFAS problems in local landfills.
I'll look forward to the answer.
And so that, because when I read through the information that was in here, wells look to be in great shape as opposed to where we stand on landfills. So we'll be having that discussion in September.
I look forward
So-
to it. Thank you.
Okay, and hopefully he can answer any questions we might have on that. So thank you very much.
That could be a long meeting, Madam Chair.
Well, that's okay. Obviously, I think we all know that the PFAS business is unending, and we need to try to get a handle on it. So thank you very much. Sorry. Okay, we now turn to FIS 22-263, and we are going to kind of do these in conjunction. And 22-264. And
Good morning. Chase Hageman, Deputy Director at the Governor's Office for Emergency Relief and Recovery.
oh, so Commissioner Caswell sent you here by yourself today, huh?
I'm on my own.
You're on your own. Okay. Where am I? Okay. Are there any questions on 263? Okay. Mike, I did have a question, and although you sent an answer, I think it's important that we all understand this. It says in there that utility or that rental assistance also receives funding for electricity and heating, whatever it is.
Correct.
And just speculating that most of the people that would be applying for rental assistance are in the category of being able to apply for LIHEAP. And so my question is, are we messing with the LIHEAP program, or do they get both, or what kind of guidance has gone out on that?
That's a great question. And as you mentioned, Madam Chair, we did provide a response, but for the record, as we understand it and as has been described to us by the Department of Energy, there is no negative impact on the LIHEAP program by the rental assistance program as in terms of the reimbursement of utility costs. Getting emergency rental assistance for utilities doesn't pull someone out of the LIHEAP program or the fuel assistance program, and there's no double dipping. There are systems in place that help track who is getting what so that when one assistance is provided for a utility, the other is not.
Okay. Are we still in the phase where the renter has to apply?
Yes, so as a basis of the program, the renter applies. That's always been the case.
Okay. And so as I looked at the figures, it doesn't appear to me that the renters are applying.
Okay.
And I don't know whether the landlords are just being kind and not kicking them out, or if, exactly where that is.
So in general, the demand for the program has sustained, if not grown, over the last year or so. So I'm not sure which numbers you're referring to where it appears that there is a reduction in applications. It actually has sustained, if not risen a little bit over time.
Oh, okay. Okay. And is that run through CAP?
Yes, so Gopher basically sends money to New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority, who works with the CAPS to facilitate the program, both rental assistance and utility assistance.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Senator Daniels.
Thank you. My understanding is that it's the renter that applies for it, and that any assistance is sent to the renter.
That's incorrect. The assistance goes directly to the landlord and the utility company to pay the rent or the utility bill. In limited circumstances, the renter would potentially receive the money if the landlord is not particularly agreeable in terms of interacting with the program.
Are there any programs, possibly under CAP or whatever, that the money is sent to the renter? Because I'm dealing with a constituent who has somebody that had been renting, but now they're not paying their rent, but they can't kick them out, and that they had applied for money, but the landlord's not seeing any of it.
On a case-by-case basis, we're happy to help work with a landlord or a tenant to resolve any particular issues, and we often do that. So cases will come into us with a particular issue or challenge to address, and we work with New Hampshire Housing Finance to see if there's a remedy. So I'd be a little reticent to speak to a specific situation without getting more detail on the applicant and the landlord situation. But I just to answer your question, sorry, I would have to get additional information from the CAPS on any programs they have where money is sent directly to the tenant. But I don't believe that is the case by and large in the ERA.
I would imagine you'll have a call from Senator Daniels.
I imagine I will.
Shortly. Representative Leishman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for being here today. So I think it was after the fact, but the LBA did provide us with a copy of the Governor's Office of Emergency Relief and Recovery, and it shows the average contribution, I guess, if you will, to help with rental assistance for utilities and internet and so forth of $9,300. Is that per year or per 6 months, or?
It would be over the over the life of the program, based on households that are receiving the benefits, and that spans all of the types of services, including rental assistance. Under ERA, under the rental assistance program, households are able to receive funding at this point under the ERA 2 program, which we'll get to in the next item, as far out or as in total 18 months. They can only ask for 3 prospective months at a time, however. But over the life of the program, they could receive as much as 18 months in support.
Okay, and just one further question,
certainly.
if I could, Madam Chair, thanks. So at our pre-fiscal meeting, I have to give credit where I guess it's due. Representative Edwards raised an interesting point. I thought that by providing rental assistance, we're actually creating a problem by forcing rents up, perhaps, when if you didn't provide that assistance, it would keep rents lower. Is that a supported theory, or make
I haven't specifically explored that in terms of data that might answer that particular question. There are limitations on what level of income a household can have to even get into the program. So in terms of the level of rents being driven up, I would be hesitant to speculate, but you know, I'm sure there's data out there that can be analyzed over time to see if that is the case.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Are there any further questions? Okay. Are there any questions on 22-264 separately? Obviously, this is just an extension of the plan. Okay. Seeing no additional questions, I'll take a motion on FIS 22-263.
Move the item.
Thank you.
Second.
Representative Leishman and Senator D'Alessandro. Will the clerk please call the roll?
It's on 263. Emmerich votes yes. Representative Leishman.
Yes.
Representative Petrie. Yes. Representative Wallner. Senator Daniels.
Yes.
Senator Morse.
Yes.
Senator Gray.
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald.
Yes.
Senator D'Alessandro.
Yes.
Representative Umberger.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the vote is 10-0.
Vote being 10-0, FIS 22-263 passes. Could I have a motion, please, on FIS 22-264?
Move the item.
Thank you, Senator D'Alessandro. Second by Senator Gray.
So we'll call on 264. Emmerich votes yes. Representative Leishman.
Yes.
Representative Petrie. Yes. Representative Wallner. Senator Daniels.
Yes.
Senator Morse.
Yes.
Senator Gray.
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald.
Yes.
Senator D'Alessandro.
Yes.
Representative Umberger.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the vote is 10-0.
The vote being 10-0, FIS 22-264 passes. Okay, we had, I believe, 4 late items that we will have to vote on. The first one is FIS 268, dealing from the Gopher office, requesting $7+ million for SUD related programming services and project investments. Are there any questions on this? Senator,
Thank you.
yes,
Rosenwald. Thank you. There are 2 parts of it that equals about $12 million for additional beds. How many beds are we talking about?
Thank you for the question, Senator. And and Chase Hageman, Deputy Director at Gopher again. Just to clarify, Senator, the 2 parts that refer to increasing bed capacity, I think only total 7 million. The proposed budgets for those are.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. Just wanted to be clear there. The short answer is it depends, because we're still working with DHHS and the Governor's Council on Alcohol and Other Drugs to finalize the program itself, which will become publicly known, posted on Gopher's webpage, excuse me, with all the guidelines necessary for that. The purpose of the detox bed program, however, is to expand bed capacity at various tiers of detox needs. And there are, I think, 4 tiers. If I remember correctly, this program would focus on the top tier, and there are a little over 60 beds in the state right now. And the idea, obviously, would be to increase those number of beds. And we have some insight that there are projects being explored that could increase that significantly, but I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. It would, in part, depend on the construct of the program.
Thank you. Well, how did you arrive at the $7 million then, if it's not by the number of beds we wanted?
So the number is based off of what would be the purpose of the program, which is capital improvements and investments. Again, we've heard from other facilities and potential facilities coming online that could have capital needs costs that range from a couple $100,000 to a couple million. So we wanted to leave room in the program to provide sufficient awards based on what becomes the eligibility and requirements of it. If you notice in the item itself, we did request a little bit of flexibility on what ultimately becomes the final funding amount for some of these programs, because as we go on to finalize what we anticipate being the need, the number may need to change, but it certainly wouldn't go beyond the authorized amount requested overall in the item.
One final, thank you. And will both of these parts be available to the Medicaid program?
Yes, the purpose, especially on the DTAC side, is to make sure that these are beds that are available for Medicaid users.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? I do have a question.
Yes.
I'm not opposed to the program, but where are we going to get the people to work in these facilities, since right now, we have nursing homes and hospitals that can't go to their full bed capacity because they don't have the staff to take care of it.
It's always a great question, Madam Chair, and it's usually always the same answer. It depends on the entity coming forward and applying, and them having sufficient staff to run the program they're proposing. As with all ARPA dollars, if for some reason this program is underutilized, those funds would come back for reallocation for other purposes. So the money would not go unused. It would eventually be used for something, but the whole state is experiencing staffing issues, including the state itself. So it's always the question, and it's always a tough one to answer.
Okay. I don't have any problem with the program. I don't want to have this great program out there and the beds go empty. So we need to make sure that when you're asking them that they tell you how they're going to man it.
And if I may,
Or
Madam Chair,
woman it, whichever.
I just wanted to point out the late items that came through for vote today are all interconnected relative to SUD initiatives and programs. So I just didn't want to leave any of the other agencies that are coming to the table late out to dry.
Right.
They're all connected.
Okay. Could I have a motion, please, on FIS 22-268?
I would move the item.
Thank you, Senator D'Alessandro. Second? Senator Gray? Clerk, please call the roll.
Roll call on 268. Emmerich votes yes. Representative Leishman?
Yes.
Representative Petrie? Yes. Representative Wallner? Senator Daniels?
Yes.
Senator Morse? Yes. Senator Gray?
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald?
Yes.
Senator D'Alessandro?
Yes.
Representative Umberger?
Yes.
Madam Chair, the vote is 10-0.
The vote being 10-0, FIS 22-268 passes.
Thank you very much.
We now turn to FIS 22-269 from the Department of Health and Human Services. And this is to just primarily to purchase and distribute naloxone kits. Good morning.
So good morning. For the record, I am Katia Fox. I'm the Director of the Division for Behavioral Health.
Good morning. Nathan White, CFO, DHHS.
Thank you. Are there any questions from anyone?
Yes, I have.
Go ahead, Senator Daniels.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to see some sort of documentation on the success we have had. I mean, we continue to provide funds for naloxone, but we never seem to see any reports on, whether the numbers are going down, whether they're going up, how the money's being spent, where it's being spent, or anything like that. And maybe you could shed some light on that.
So thank you. And in one of the fiscal questions, this question did come up and we cited the research. We do have Dr. Ballard here who has looked extensively into the effectiveness of the different strategies for addressing, most importantly, the opioid epidemic. So he's available here to perhaps answer your questions, and we can also provide the research that we cited in that response.
Okay. Why don't you ask him to come up?
Good morning. For the record, my name is Jonathan Ballard. I work as the Chief Medical Officer for Department of Health and Human Services. There's been extensive research on the approach to improving upon the opioid overdose problem, substance use disorder in general. As you're aware, New Hampshire's been
Could you move your mic a little closer? Thank you.
New Hampshire had a significant escalation of opioid overdose deaths, really starting in about 2014, and we hit our high in 2017. And so that led forth, a very large multi-pronged effort to combat substance use disorder and reduce opioid overdose deaths. Naloxone being one part of that overall package. Since 2017, opioid overdose deaths in New Hampshire have declined year over year, and we're the only state in the country that has had year-over-year declines of opioid overdose deaths. And in fact, during the pandemic, when most all other states, except 4 states, had opioid overdose deaths significantly increase, including our neighbors in Vermont had very high year-over-year increases. New Hampshire did not. So there's been studies, researchers who have looked at this. In the medical journal called Public Health Reports, it's the Surgeon General's medical journal. An article came out last year that looked at why did New Hampshire and the 3 other states have a different outcome compared to the rest of the country, when really this is a worldwide problem of substance use disorder and opioid overdose deaths. In that report, it said specifically that New Hampshire and these other states had very common approaches of why they were so successful. It said that you have to have broad state policies, you have to improve treatment opportunities, you have to educate prescribers, you have to, and they lay out particularly, you have to have broad-based naloxone distribution. What New Hampshire did differently prior to the the pandemic, was we made a shift in how we got naloxone out to the public. Previously, there's a standing order that I write that anybody can pick up naloxone. The legislature allowed us to make that standing order. People can go to a pharmacy to pick it up. But that's not been successful in New Hampshire nor other states across the country. It has to be directly distributed, put into the hands of bystanders, loved ones, to allow for that opioid reversal agent to be available and work. So when we created the Doorways program, we shifted distribution of naloxone being from a centralized state program out through our partners, more local to the communities where individuals, where the Doorways know their local nonprofit agencies. The nonprofit agencies and other partners are the ones who are giving out naloxone directly to the potential bystanders for an opioid overdose death. And we know naloxone works in the laboratory method, but what I think you're getting at, Senator Daniels, is how do we know it's getting to the right people and that it's being effective? If we look at our AMR, ambulance companies reports for Manchester and Nashua, you see last year a very significant change happened. It used to be most naloxone was being delivered by the ambulance, the truck, when it arrives to a scene of an opioid overdose. And now it's switched. They were finding that more naloxone was arriving and administered by a bystander compared to the ambulance. So that was a very key data point we're tracking about that. We're also tracking where the naloxone's going, through the Doorways. We keep good records on where it's happening, how much it's going to. We've embarked this summer on reaching out and connecting, visiting the Doorways. They're telling me that it's being used, but they need more. What's happening with the border and more fentanyl coming into the country has been, in the recent news over the last few months, of some increase in spikes across the country with more exposure to fentanyl, has required more naloxone to combat this. And that's partly why this is really critical now, that we shore up, make sure that the supply of naloxone, as part of the overall larger program that we have that's been so successful for New Hampshire compared to other states. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Follow up?
Yes, go ahead.
Do we track have any data to indicate if the recipients of naloxone are entering a treatment program?
We do, in the fact that they enter into the doorway system. So when they come through the doorways, we do an intake process, and we're making those referrals, warm handoffs, care coordination, trying to close the loop. Substance use disorder, though, is a remitting, relapsing disease, and so we see it's all parts of recovery that some people will not. Would not successfully maintain their sobriety of the illness, essentially maintain in recovery for treatment, and will have relapses. Ultimately, there will be some individuals who may be revived more than once, but what that does is it allows that person to still be alive and still have a chance to achieve recovery through our partners.
Thank you.
Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. I'm glad you brought up Manchester and Nashua, because while the statewide opioid deaths may be down, Manchester and Nashua are both on track this year to have an increase of about a third versus a year ago. So something is wrong in our two largest cities. What improvements is the department going to make with the doorways to bring Nashua and Manchester down in opioid deaths as the rest of the state seems to be doing?
Thank you, Senator Rosenwald. So just recently, I had an opportunity to visit the doorway there in Manchester and see the good work that's being done, and they're really, doubling down on shoring up the linkages that they have with community partners, such as Farnham and others, to get more people transitioned earlier, more timely into these treatment programs. We're also wanting to make sure that we have adequate levels of naloxone in those communities. And then part of it, though, is beyond the treatment system. Part of it is beyond drug pattern problems as well. I think there's others here as well that could speak to the non-treatment aspects of it that may be contributing to that particular patterns we're seeing.
Are there further questions? Seeing none, could I have a motion on FIS 22-269?
I'll move the item.
Thank you, Senator D'Alessandro. Second? Thank you, Senator Gray. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Roll call on 269. Emmerich votes yes. Representative Leishman.
Yes.
Representative Petrie. Yes. Representative Wallner. Senator Daniels.
Yes.
Senator Morse. Yes. Senator Gray.
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald.
Yes.
Senator D'Alessandro.
Yes.
Representative Umberger.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the vote is 10-0.
The vote being 10-0, FIS 22-269 passes. We now turn to FIS 22-270 from the Department of Safety.
Good morning, Steve Lavoie, Director of Administration from the Department of Safety, and with me is Lieutenant Joe Villers from New Hampshire State Police.
Oh, so he didn't get the memo on the uniform of the day, huh?
Apparently not.
Okay. Sorry. Are there any questions on for safety on this program? It sounds to me like it's going to be a very good program. So could I please have a motion?
Move the item.
Thank you, Representative Leachman. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Senator D'Alessandro. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Roll call on 270. Emmerich votes yes. Representative Leishman.
Yes.
Representative Petrie. Yes. Representative Wallner. Yes. Senator Daniels.
Yes.
Senator Morse.
Yes.
Senator Gray.
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald.
Yes.
Senator D'Alessandro.
Yes.
Representative Umberger.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the vote is 10-0.
The vote being 10-0, FIS 22-270 passes. Now, don't think you're going to get away with such easy things in the future, okay, Steve? Thank you very much. Okay, we now turn to FIS 22-271 from the Gopher office. Oh, it's an information item. Okay. Oh. Does anybody have any questions on this item? Okay, thank you. All right, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you, Tracy. Turning to the informational items, I just want to mention that FIS 22-257 on state employee health insurance, DAS will provide us a little presentation in September on how we manage health insurance for the employees. And I've already mentioned that on 22-260, the concern that I had there was on the PFAS in the landfills, which Representative Emmerich also brought up. Okay, so we now move to the audits. This is that big book that you all received. Yeah. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Steve Smith, Director of Audits for the LBA. These two reports, the single audit report, the big one, and then the small management letter are a product of KPMG. We retain them from the single audit, and the management letter is a byproduct of both the state ACFR audit as well as the single audit. Joining us from KPMG is Brock Romano, the partner on the engagement, and with him is Brianne Orisco, Senior Manager. And then from Department of Administrative Services is Commissioner Arlinghouse and Dana DeCall, our comptroller. So I believe Dana has a couple of opening remarks, and then she'll turn it over to KPMG.
Good morning, Dana Call, State Comptroller. My office is responsible for working with both teams to get this document put out for you. We are a little later in the cycle than normal. This is an FY21 document, and we're closing FY22 right now as we speak, in fact today. So we were allowed the last 2 years due to the COVID pandemic, we were allowed a little extra time to get the single audit work done. Typically, it is out, so after the fiscal year closes, we usually have 9 months to get it out, so it's usually the following March. They provided an extension all the way out, excuse me, until this September. However, we were striving to get it done by June 30th, so that was our goal, and similar to last year. So you have a handout. There are a couple little tweaks on the finding numbers. We put the handout together a few weeks before we had sort of finalized the categories of findings, but in general, the total findings are portrayed for you as a 35, 36. That's about where we're at for in total for material weaknesses and significant deficiencies. And based on, I gave you sort of the total federal dollars that are subject to audit. Not everything gets audited every year. There's a cycle for determining, and the auditors will let you know how they do that. But basically, the federal funds have, as you are aware, continued to climb. We were typically, for year after year after year, about 2.3 billion. We went to 3.6 billion and now $3 billion, soon to be another billion. We're counting billions now, which is a little scary. What we had through fiscal 21 doesn't reflect any ARPA funds. So what we reflect through fiscal 21 was essentially the CARES Act money that came, the Coronavirus Relief Fund, the first billion. And then obviously a lot of programs like education and Medicaid and others got other funding sources in addition to the Coronavirus Relief Fund that was administered through the Gopher office. So really it's, you're seeing between this year, between fiscal 21 and fiscal 22, what we'll present to you a year from now is sort of the wrap up of the first billion, the coronavirus, the first 1.25 billion, which is the Coronavirus Relief Fund. And then subsequent to that, you'll start to see the ARPA funding coming through these reports. So there's a big delay in terms of when something is provided to the state, when we've allocated it to whomever is going to spend it, and then when it actually gets spent. So just keep that in mind. But the good news is, even with the extensive additional federal funding, our audit findings, we believe, are manageable. Similar themes, a lot of it with compliance findings is a technicality. Unlike the ACFR audit, where we have some level of materiality in terms of determining whether findings that get presented to you, how significant they are, compliance findings are reported essentially regardless. So it tends to be a higher number of findings, but we look at sort of the material weaknesses and try to keep that in check. So I guess I want to thank my team in admin services because again, we're doing this with our existing staff, and we're hoping, again, to expand that as the ARPA funds come through, because there is a lot of audit work that gets done sort of at the tail end. So, but we have it under control, and I don't know if the commissioner has anything to add. No, he's here for questions. So we'll be happy to answer questions after KPMG does their formal remarks.
Thank you, Dana. For the record, my name's Brock Romano. I'm the lead audit partner, both on the ACFR as well as the single audit. Brianna Risco is joining me today. She's one of two senior managers who help with the uniform guidance or the audit of federal awards, given the complexity of it. So what I want to do this morning is maybe just make a few brief comments on the telephone book that's in front of you, and then ask Brianne to kind of go into some level of detail, and then happy to go into more detail if there's questions that the committee has. So just in terms of the telephone book, just to kind of give you an idea of the contents, there's multiple tabs in here, and I just want to talk briefly about those tabs. So there's a tab for the financial statements, and so that section is actually the ACFR, and that was presented to the Fiscal Committee back in January of this year. The next section is our reports on compliance and internal controls. There's actually two reports in there. One of them is a report on internal controls related to the ACFR, and again, that's reproduced here, but that was presented to the committee back in January of this year. And then the other report is a report on internal controls on federal programs. Not an opinion, but a report on internal controls. And then we actually give a compliance opinion, we give an audit opinion on compliance for those largest programs that we audit. And, Brianne will get into that in a little more detail as well. And then there's a section called the C4, the Schedule of Expenditures of Federal Awards. Think of that as the equivalent of a financial statement. So this is where we would list all of the 300 or so programs that the state of New Hampshire spent during the year. There's a summary page that I'm going to flip to later on that'll let you see that visually in maybe a page or two instead of trying to digest 27 pages. And then there's a section on current year findings. So there's 36 total findings. One of them relates to the ACFR, which again was presented and reproduced here. And then there's 35 findings relative to your federal awards. Again, Brianne will go into a little bit more detail on that, but just to give the committee a sense of the contents. Then the last tab is a section of status of prior year findings. And so findings
basically stay in that section until they're resolved, and or the federal government expresses no further action. Usually that happens after a period of time, 2 or 3 years. I might just make the general comment that when we do our audit, when we identify a finding, we're typically well into the next fiscal year. So the life cycle of a compliance finding typically has 2 years. So, don't be alarmed if you see a finding that maybe, spans 2 audit reports, but you might want to pay attention to findings that stay on 3, 4, that are more chronic. And Brianne will mention a little bit of that. So now, if you'll indulge me, I'm going to actually maybe have you flip into a page or two. So just beyond the table of contents, after the introduction letter, there's page number B2 and B3. And so I point this page out because this lets you see in 2 pages, all in a summary fashion, the $4.6 billion that New Hampshire spent. Dana had mentioned it, and it's broken out by something called Type A programs, which are basically your largest programs. State of New Hampshire typically has less than 30 of those largest programs, with just a handful: Medicaid, unemployment this year, coronavirus relief fund, making up the majority of the spend. So rather than go through 26 pages of detail, this allows you to see in a quick snapshot kind of, what the spending would look like. Again, trying to be high level here. If we want to go into more detail, happy to do it. And then the next page that I might ask you to flip to is in the tab called Current Year Findings and Question Cost. That first page, F-1, is for folks of my generation, I call this the Cliff Notes version of the Uniform Guidance Report. It summarizes on just a couple of pages, basically the audit results. And so the top of the page is reserved for the financial statements. Again, reproduced, we've already discussed it. The middle of the page talks about the federal awards. That's kind of what we're here to talk about. It lets you know that we identified some findings that have material weaknesses. Again, most severe category of control findings. Some findings had significant deficiencies, the middle category, if you will. And then it lists the programs where we actually detail out the programs that had a qualified opinion. Qualified in the sense that there was some compliance element that wasn't materially adhered to. Think about allowability, think about federal reporting, think about subrecipient monitoring. Those are the types of compliance areas that we test, and if there's a big enough problem in that area, we would qualify. So here's the programs that had a qualification. The remaining programs we looked at were unqualified. And then on the next page, it shows the 18 largest programs that we looked at. So that's kind of a real high level of what the telephone book has. We do want to pull you down into a little detail. I've asked Brianne to kind of prepare some comments about some things that might be of interest to the committee. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to her and let her walk through that. Whoops.
Thank you, Brock. Good morning. For the record, my name's Brianna Risco. As Brock mentioned, as part of the 2021 Uniform Guidance Audit, we focused on 18 of your largest programs. The Uniform Guidance does not require us to look at programs every single year. There's some risk assessment guidance that we're allowed to apply, looking at prior year audit results, dollar spends, as well as certain programs that the Office of Management and Budget designates as what are called higher risk programs. So for 2021, OMB did designate the Medicaid program as a higher risk program. This program is higher risk every year by OMB. They also designated some of the COVID programs as higher risk: Education Stabilization Fund, Coronavirus Relief Fund, and the Emergency Rental Assistance Program were 3 of those programs that were designated higher risk that we looked at as part of the audit. The 18 programs that we focused on constituted about $3.9 billion of the total $4.6 billion reported on the CFA, or about 85% of your total spend. 6 of the 18 programs were also audited as part of the 2020 audit, last year's audit, and were required to be audited again because of the severity of the findings identified during 2020. Those included Medicaid, the unemployment program, Title I, temporary assistance, foster care, and opioid. So programs managed across a couple of the state's different departments. And then one of the programs, the Coronavirus Relief Fund, was also audited as part of 2020 and re-audited as part of 2021, simply because it was designated higher risk. There were no findings identified as part of the 2020 audit. Brock and Dana both covered this a little bit. There were a total of 36 findings, one for the ACFR, 35 for the uniform guidance. 16 of the 35 were considered to be material weaknesses, and 19 of them were considered to be significant deficiencies. And of the 35 findings that were reported for 2021, 7 of them were repeated comments of those that were also included in the 2020 report. So based on the results of our audit, we issued an opinion on each of the 18 programs that we audited, which are summarized for you on that page F1. For 9 of the 18 programs, we issued a qualified or a modified opinion. That included the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, the Unemployment Program, the Coronavirus Relief Fund, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, the Education Stabilization Fund, the Epidemiology and Laboratory Capacity Grants Program, the Temporary Assistance Program, the LIHEAP Program, and the Medicaid Program. Each of these 9 programs had findings that were considered to be material instances of non-compliance, and in some cases, material weaknesses and internal control. The Medicaid program additionally has a scope limitation noted as part of the 2021 audit, which is consistent with the 2020 audit. Of the 9 programs that we issued a qualified opinion for, 3 of them also had qualified opinions as part of the 2020 audit. That includes unemployment, TANF, and Medicaid. And TANF and Medicaid have had qualified opinions for at least the past 3 years. The 11 remaining programs had an unmodified or a clean opinion for 2021. The findings themselves begin on page F7, beginning with finding 2021-002. 001 relates to the financial statements and was presented to you previously. And finally, each of the findings that is included in the report, management is required to provide a response to the finding, which is noted at the bottom of each of the findings, and they're also required to provide a corrective action plan to resolve the matters that are identified. The corrective action plan are included within the report. And then, as outlined in our opinion, the state is responsible for preparing a corrective action plan, and the state's responses and what was included in those is not subject to our audit opinion, and so we do not express an opinion on the corrective action plan. Is there any questions I can answer on the 2021 audit report?
Senator Daniels?
Thank you. How does a program earn a designation of high risk?
The high-risk programs are designated by the Office of Management and Budget. So each year when they put out the compliance supplement, they designate certain programs to be higher risk. Typically, it includes only the Medicaid program. It's always a high-risk program. With the outflow of funding related to COVID, they started designating some of those programs that get a significant amount of COVID dollars as higher risk as well. But that designation is given solely by the Office of Management and Budget.
Okay, and just could you elaborate a little bit more? High risk of what?
It's programs, I think, where OMB has determined that there's a high risk of non-compliance with federal regulations. So if you think about the Medicaid program, for example, there's very complex eligibility requirements to depend on, are you eligible for Medicaid? And if you are, which benefit span or eligibility program are you in fact eligible for? It's a complex calculation. Many things go into it. So I think because of that, for one example, OMB feels that Medicaid is a higher risk program and feels that there could be a high risk of non-compliance or misuse of federal dollars.
Okay, thank you. And final question. Yes. It was mentioned earlier that some of the times you see after 2 or 3 years that things just drop off. Is there a reason for that, or is that the federal government decides this isn't important anymore and we've wasted our time for 2 or 3 years? Or
I think the answer would be twofold. So, in most cases, by the time we identify a finding as part of the audit, you're well into your next fiscal year. So, by nature of having identified it halfway through your next fiscal year, it would live likely again on our next audit report, just giving the timing of when the audit happens. In the case of things kind of falling off, in some cases, federal departments will write directly to, say, your Department of Health and Human Services and say, the audit finding that KPMG noted in their report from X year had to do with this. We feel that you have provided sufficient documentation since then to resolve that item. And federal HHS will say, we now consider this finding to be closed. So in that case, we would review that letter and make sure that we agree that that finding is in fact closed.
Good. Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Representative Leishman.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Is it all right that we venture to the management letter, or are we still on the phone book?
No, please.
They're shaking their head yes, so.
All right.
Maybe before we just leave this, we threw a lot of stuff at you.
Yeah.
Your head's probably spinning. Let me try to put some of this in context. So I've worked on several statewide single audits, California, New York, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Illinois. The results here, I would say, are middle of the pack, right? There are other states that have many more findings, more severe findings, lots of question costs. And there are some states that, quite frankly, have less findings, less qualifications than you do. But my experience, having worked on several states, you're kind of middle of the pack in terms of the states that I kind of mentioned. And so you hear all these things, material weakness, qualifications, and your head must be spinning, you know, what's happening. It is very hard to run these programs with these levels of complexity without some degree of hiccups. And really what we look for is the adjudication of those items, right? Are they rolling off? And we've been satisfied both with the department response as well as the supervision from DAS and the LBA that, you know, New Hampshire's got a very good handle on its federal program. So I don't want to dwell on the uniform guidance, but I also want to try to put some of that into context for the members. I apologize if happy
no,
to go to the management letter next.
No problem. No problem whatsoever. Yes, you may.
I have a 30,000-foot question because I'm a new kid to this committee. This is only my second year, so I'm learning. It seems to me that this audit is really done for the federal government.
Correct.
Okay, then I'm
Yes.
I'm got my feet on the ground again because I was trying to figure out who's auditing who and why, and it looks like this is our report through you to the federal government about how we're handling their funding.
They want some oversight of their spend, just like you want oversight of your spend, and that this product does it for them.
And just as a curiosity, do they fund this?
They allow the audit costs to be funded. Oftentimes, the grant dollars are capped, and they would rather use grant dollars for direct assistance than put audit costs in front of programmatic dollars. So yes, they're allowable, but not always utilized. That's a fair statement to Dana. And
Yes, but when you approve an item through this mechanism, you'll see an audit fund set aside budget. That covers this cost.
Okay, thank you.
For the most part. And I was going to add that the federal cognizant agencies can audit our agencies directly as well. This is meant to be sort of a comprehensive look, but they'll come in individually and audit a program on their own as well. And those sort of happen few and far between, but they do happen. So,
Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my question really is that interplay between this audit and the program specific audits. So for example, recently the 3-year audit of the opioid treatment programs where we have to pay the federal government back like almost $8 million. Is that captured anywhere in these, or is it because it goes back a few years it's not?
That's the opioid. It will come up in an audit depending on the timing. So the same types of things that federal agency found, if it's one of the programs that KPMG audits, they will likely find similar findings, I guess is what I would say. That particular one that you talked about was came out after this audit was complete.
Okay, are you moving to the management report, or are you still in the,
Whenever
the
we're to
telephone
the
book?
letter, the management letter here.
Okay. All right, so
All right.
go ahead.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thank you all for being here. So Representative Edwards had a question. He couldn't be here today, so he asked me to ask the question. So on page 3, down where you have recommendations, it says management should reinforce policies and procedures. There's an implied, I guess, feeling there that there are policies and procedures, but do you folks go and look at those policies and procedures that you're recommending that be followed?
You want to start?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So the answer is yes, we do. We have to audit to something, and normally we audit to the existing policies or procedures. If there aren't adequate existing policies and procedures, we would then look to our best practices across our client base. And so in this particular case, for this particular finding, the policy of deprovisioning somebody who is terminated is when the IT department is notified. And we compared that against, so that's kind of a passive policy, right? We wait to be notified, and once we're notified, we will deprovision somebody. And we looked at that, whether that's kind of adequate, or maybe they should be more proactive. Should they be doing something to try to gather that information as opposed to waiting for it to come in? And we felt that their policy was adequate given the technology and the users of that technology, because they weren't as decentralized. So, for example, if we were talking about New Hampshire first, which would be the statewide accounting system, multiple departments, multiple agencies, sitting back and waiting for notification might not be a best practice for that policy. Whereas for New Heights, even though it's dealing with a large federal agency, we thought that policy was adequate. So that's a long answer to a simple question, but hopefully it addressed the question that you asked.
I think it probably did. Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Are there any further questions?
No, just
Yes, go ahead.
thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just a quick comment. Brock, I've been around for these audits for the last 24 years. It's been a wonderful experience. I remember the bad audits that we heard.
Yes.
The very bad audits that we heard from your entity vis-a-vis state government. I think what I've seen in the last few years is a significant improvement change. High level work on the part of the state, and high level work on the part of your organization in terms of the reports. The reports are better, they're more consistent, they're well done and well articulated. So I compliment you, and I compliment the comptroller. You know, many years we went without a comptroller, and that was a very difficult period for us here in the state. We couldn't fill those jobs. Hopefully, we have a lasting comptroller as we speak. But I just want to point out to the committee, there's been a dramatic change over the years. These audits, from our standpoint, are much better, and I think we're doing a much better job. I can remember deficiencies that were pointed out at other times that were very costly to the state of New Hampshire.
Yep.
So kudos to you for the job well done.
Not to
and,
me, it's
let's
the
keep
state
it
for
up.
sure.
Thank you.
I know Charlie wanted to mention that if we're wrapping up questions, we just want to acknowledge that Brock is rolling off the state audit. And we're going to have a new KPMG partner. Marie Zimmerman is coming back, so a familiar face, but it's been a great working relationship with Brock, so we will miss him.
Kudos to Brock, no question.
I have to say something because so Brock has been involved in the audit or the single audit for the state since like the 1940s, I think, something like that, but for a very long time. But it's very rare that that you enjoy your relationship with your auditor. It's sort of like saying I have a great proctologist. But in this particular case, we did enjoy it, and the state is although there's another great auditor coming, but the state is going to miss Brock, and you're going to miss Brock, and I can't promise Senator D'Alessandro that we'll have another Italian either. So on behalf of the state of New Hampshire and all of its people, thank you so much.
Well, I'm embarrassed and uncalled for, but I will just say I got more than I gave in the 20 or so years I've been here. It's been a great pleasure and truly enjoyed working with people. And I ascribe a lot of my technical skills to having learned from my colleagues at the LBA office, right, when I was a young staff person and a young manager. So state of New Hampshire should be very proud of its people and its departments, and it's been my pleasure to be here. Wish you best of luck, and maybe you don't get rid of me so easy. Maybe I show up at another meeting for some unforeseen reason. Unforeseen reason, yeah, might.
By the way, you're welcome anytime.
Thank you very much.
You know,
Madam
isn't that what you always say to auditors?
Yeah,
You're
always.
welcome anytime.
Anytime, yeah.
We want to extend a grazie mille.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. And what does that mean?
Many thanks.
Oh, okay.
Million thanks.
A million thanks. Okay. All right. Great. Great. Steve, is there anything else from you? No?
Do we need to accept? Yeah.
Okay. Oh, did you get that? Okay. Go back in here. Okay. Could I have a motion to accept the audit report, place it on file, and distribute it in the normal way?
So moved.
Did I do okay?
Perfect.
Second.
Okay. I think we need a roll call on this, right? Or not? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Opposed? Okay. Seeing none, then our next meeting is August 10th at 10 o'clock. And we're going to be discussing with the Attorney General the procedures that he has put together for YDC. And I expect it will not be a short meeting, but please, if you have questions, make sure that you contact the Attorney General to try to work them out so that we are not spending 8 hours here. Okay. Well, in that case, thank you all for interrupting your summer, and I'll see you next month. Oh, Chris, you have something?
I just wanted to clarify that the August 10th meeting is a special meeting for that one purpose.
Right.
That there is a regularly scheduled meeting September 9th for regular fiscal committee business.
Right.
Just wanted to get that on the record.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this is very special. Only one item. Okay. Thank you all. Have a good afternoon, and I'll see you in August.